In today's episode, you'll finally learn how you can understand natives in English when they speak fast. Like when you're watching a movie or listening to music and hear a sentence like, "Did you ever make it out of the town?" Even though that sounds fast, you can actually hear some common patterns. For example, the words "did you" often transform into "did-jew." And this is only one example of how natives cut, link, and reduce their words. So stay tuned because today, Ethan, Izzy, and I are gonna explore and teach you many examples of these with music to make your learning fun, natural, and convenient. Oh, yeah, citizens of the world, this is Ksenia from Real Life English, where every single week it is our mission to take you beyond the classroom to speak English confidently and naturally, to connect to the world and use your English as the doorway to your greatest life. I have a question to our audience and to you guys as well. Many would know that the best-selling album of the 20th century was Michael Jackson's Thriller. But do you know, guys, what is the best-selling album of the 21st century?
I can guess based on conversations that I've been having with you, Ksenia, this week and what we'll cover in today's episode. Is it Adele's 21?
Exactly. And that's so easy such a coincidence and so easy to remember now is that the best-selling album for the 21st century so far is Adele's 21.
21. Yeah. That was her age when she started writing.
It must be more challenging, right? Because nowadays people don't tend to buy albums as much. They're streaming them, or even probably when that album came out, people might have been buying it on iTunes, for example, but they might have just bought individual tracks. So I wonder if they have a different way of measuring that nowadays.
I think it's an album from 2011. I don't remember. Izzy, do you know?
It's, from around that time. If not 2011, 2010. And probably one of the latest ones to have sold this many copies.
Why did I bring Adele? Because recently, the other day, actually, Izzy, you were telling me that you are into music of Adele and that you found her lyrics to be just a great example, a great source of material for our today's episode because her lyrics contain a lot of connected speech. So could you tell us more about what you've discovered, what you've been researching on?
That was such a great discovery because, first of all, it is great music. I think that's why it sells so much. But it's so conversational as well. The lyrics, if you read them without knowing that they're actual lyrics, like musical material, you wouldn't know. Maybe you'd think like, is this a letter or something? So it sounds very conversational. And yeah, it does contain a lot of connected speech in the way she sings. But before we explore all of that, Ethan, what would you say is the value for a learner, for them to learn more about connected speech?
Yeah, and just in case people are tuning to us for the first time or one of the first times and this term of connected speech is new to them, it's what we typically will say that we native English speakers cut, connect, and also shorten different sounds and words in English. So the reason this is important, I usually will say, because learners all the time are saying that native English speakers speak too fast. But more important than that isn't so much that we speak fast, it's more because of this connected speech that you're not being able to hear the individual words, especially if you studied through the traditional system, which does not pay any attention to this. You learned English in a sort of robotic way. I remember the first time I taught in school that we'd have these recordings that we do for listening exercise, and it just was not at all natural. And so when you get thrown out into the real world and all of a sudden we're reducing sounds, we're connecting words together, you feel panicky, you feel lost because it sounds nothing like what you heard in school. So that would be the first value, is that maybe through the classroom you had one experience, and then when you get out into the real world, it feels like a puzzle where just all the pieces are jumbled together. You have no idea how to put them together. Connected speech helps you start putting them together so you can see the full picture. And the other thing is that you don't have to use this in your speaking, but it can be really nice for you don't even have to sound like a native, but it does help you to sound more natural, to flow more with your speaking, so that when people hear you, they'll also feel like it's easier to connect with you, that's easier to understand you without having to filter so much in their head what you're saying.
Yeah, and today we're going to explore a lot of that. And I want to challenge you, Ethan, today to tell us, what is Adele actually talking about in some of these songs that I'll actually sing? I'll try and sing. I'm not a singer, but
Do you have a guitar?
I'll do my best.
Do you have an instrument?
I didn't prepare for that. And in the process of explaining how she's saying these words or singing, I want you to just break down all the connected speech. Are you ready?
I'll try my best.
All right, let's do it. So I have 3 songs, and for each one, I'll just sing a brief part of the chorus so you know which song I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure you know, because these are very popular. And after singing a verse of it, a part of it, then we'll try and break down each line. So the first one is actually one that is probably the most popular song off of that album, 21. It's Someone Like You.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. You guys know that one, right?
Yeah.
So there's a verse that comes right before the chorus that goes like this. I hate to turn up out of the blue uninvited, but I couldn't stay away. I couldn't fight it. I'd hoped you'd see my face, and that you'd be reminded that for me, it isn't over. Never mind, I'll find. You guys know that, right?
Someone like you.
So
Nice.
there's so many examples there of connected speech. And right from that very first line, I hate to turn up out of the blue. I hate to turn up out of the blue uninvited. So in that very first line, what is she saying and how is she saying that?
I think to define the line, what it means, let's start with I hate to turn up. To turn up is to show up, to appear somewhere. And out of the blue is a very nice idiomatic expression, which means suddenly, unexpectedly.
It goes right hand in hand with uninvited. That it's a word formation, right? With the prefix un, that basically means you were not invited. So it's really nice starting with a phrasal verb like this, because phrasal verbs pretty much always have connected speech. They have, first of all, the second word, which is usually a preposition that we also call a particle when it's in the context of a phrasal verb. So these particles are a function word. Function words are usually the parts of speech that help to add some extra meaning. And the other words we have are content words, which hold the main meaning of the sentence. So content words are things like verbs, adjectives, nouns, and function words are particles, articles, prepositions, even word endings like ing, for example. So it's really important, first off, when you're getting into learning connected speech, if you have not already learned about this, to start to be able to identify content and function words, because function words almost always reduce and content words don't reduce. So this is what gives English its musicality. So once you've done that, we have phrasal verbs that have always a verb, which is a content word, and a particle, which is a function word. So that's why they almost always connect together. So we had turn up. So you can hear that it's not turn up. We're not saying those equally, but we're actually reducing the up a bit, and the turn connects to it. So we have turn up, turn up.
And as Ksenia said, to turn up is to show up, to appear, right?
So that's another one, show up. And we could think of other phrasal verbs. Maybe we'll hear some more in the song, but it's a good exercise to just think of different phrasal verbs like run out of milk. That we have run out of something means that it finishes. Run out of. So you can hear that the out of, that both of those are function words. They go together, and run is really the only thing that's emphasized there. So run out of. Can you guys think of any other phrasal verb examples like this?
Get up.
Yeah. Get up and go, for example.
Get up and go.
So if we have that, we have get up. We have an American T there. This happens in American English when we have a T between two vowel sounds. And I think even in singing, Adele might not do this in her speaking, but in singing, it seems like she does this. And also reduces, right? So get up and go. And oftentimes what you say is like an N sound. Get up and go.
But Ethan, let me ask you, what does happen in this beautiful idiomatic expression, out of the blue? Any connections here?
very similarly, right? We said function words are prepositions. So we have two prepositions in that expression. So we have out and of. Of, so that's another really good one. Rule of thumb that people can learn. So when we say a rule of thumb, we mean something, a rule that in most cases is true. And this could be of like OF, or it could also be the contraction of, like in could have or should have. It gets reduced usually to just the schwa sound, which is this sound, which is the most common sound in English. So out of the blue, you'll never hear a native say out of the blue. We say out of the blue, out of the blue. Blue is the only word that gets emphasized there. It's the only content word.
Hey guys, that's so cool that we're defining it all here, but I imagine that for some of our listeners and viewers, it may be challenging to perceive it all just by ear without the text to refer to. So just a reminder, guys, all of you who are watching this episode here on YouTube or listening to us on any streaming platforms, make sure that you check out the Real Life English app, because there you will be getting the audio file together with the transcript that you can listen to and follow along. So you will be seeing everything that we're defining here. Besides the transcript, you will be getting also the flashcards where we define the most important words and expressions from this episode. So you can learn and review them to never forget and use those words in your real life English conversations. Don't wait any longer. Go grab the link to download the Real Life English app in the description to this video, or simply search for Real Life English in your favorite app store.
Ah, yeah. Now, let's continue with the next line from the song. So, two interesting examples of connected speech here. In the beginning of the line, she says, but I couldn't stay away. And then she says, I couldn't fight it. And she even connects that with the next word in the next line, which is, I couldn't fight it. I couldn't fight it. So you can hear that American T twice there.
Yeah, that line was chock full of different American T's, right? So there's but I. You hear this all the time. But I. So again, American T, and it connects to the next vowel. This American T sound happens anytime that we have T between two vowel sounds. So for example, cat and dog becomes cat and dog. And the next one was, I couldn't fight it, right? So the same thing's happening here. That fight ends with a T. So she doesn't say, I couldn't fight it. She says, I couldn't fight it, right? I couldn't fight it. So the T turns into a D and connects to the it. And I also noticed there we had an NT in couldn't. So again, like couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't, all these, you would hear that we cut the T off at the end. And this happens similarly in words where we have NT in the middle, like internet, international, dentist. So we lose that T sound, right? The T is very dynamic in American English. So it's good to learn how it changes in different cases.
Guys, take advantage, listeners and dear viewers, and repeat those lines. By the end of this episode, you might have learned the whole song by Adele and sing along.
And she also says, I couldn't fight it. Just going back to vocabulary a bit. What is she trying to say there? What does she mean by to fight it? What is she talking about?
Interesting. She can't resist in this context. Yeah. So she, as we remember from the beginning, she didn't want to come uninvited, but she couldn't resist. She couldn't fight it. So she came uninvited, right?
All right. So she goes on to say, I had hoped you'd see my face and that you'd be reminded that for me, it isn't over. It isn't over. What is she?
Never mind, I'll fight.
What is she talking about there?
I can't fight it. Sorry.
What is she saying there? Like, it isn't over. What does that mean if something is over in this case?
We can assume that she's singing about her ex relationships. So for her, seemingly, it isn't over. She's still in love with that guy.
And how is she saying that, Ethan?
So it's very similar to what we've seen before with the American T. So instead of saying it isn't over, she says it isn't over. It isn't over. So we get American T there. It isn't. It isn't. And then again, because isn't has that NT at the end of it, she doesn't say isn't. She says isn't. It isn't over. And even the N sound then that we have isn't, we drop the T and the N connects to over. It isn't over. It isn't over. And at the beginning of that line too, there was another nice piece of connected speech with, and that you'd be reminded, but she doesn't say it that way. Here we have another really nice pattern of connected speech. Usually in American English, when we have a T followed by a Y sound, it turns into a ch sound. Normally this Y sound will come from pronouns like you and your. So that you would become that you, or that your would become that your. So that you'd be reminded is that you'd be reminded.
All right, so that's the verse right before the chorus. That's the entire verse. And then it follows with the chorus. Never mind, I'll find. But let's move on to the next song. So next we have Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Is it me?
In this one, actually, she's saying hello, but the guy doesn't answer, right? So
she's on the answering machine. That's what we
Answering
call that
machine.
device.
Yeah, just one.
it's hello from the other
Doesn't
side.
really exist anymore.
All right, let's sing it. Hello, how are you? It's so typical of me to talk about myself. I'm sorry. I hope that you will. Did you ever make it out of that time when nothing ever happened? It's no secret that the both of us are running out of time. Hello from the and so on. So this is the
Beautiful.
verse, right? This is the second verse. And that first line, or second line actually, it's so typical of me to talk about myself. I'm sorry. What does that mean? Like if something is typical of somebody, Ksenia?
When you say that it's typical of me to do something, you mean that it's like my characteristic, or I'm used to doing this, or you can describe me like that. Like, for example, oh, it's so typical of me to get into those awkward silences in the meetings, right? Something like that.
And how is she saying those words, Ethan? A word chunk, right? Typical of.
Ooh, what's a word chunk? That's an important thing coming to connected speech that we haven't defined here. And we did a few episodes ago. We did an episode all about word chunks, but maybe you could define that for people who haven't listened to that one.
So word chunks are these formations, these group of words that they often come together. It's very similar to the concept of collocations, but word chunks is about not just the meaning, but you're also talking about the sound. When you hear the expression word chunk, you think of a chunk that's very much like together of words, and that has a single sound unit almost, right? And in this case, it has that, like typical of me. It's almost like if you don't know English, that'll sound like an individual word, typical of me.
So we have the content word typical here, and the other two are function words. And we already talked about this pattern of connected speech earlier, where the of will become just a schwa sound, and then we have the L from typical linking onto that schwa sound. So it's typical of me, typical of me.
It's so typical of me. It's also connected, right? It's so typical of me. It's so typical of me.
Yeah, and probably in American and fast speech would even drop that T sound and just say is so, is so.
And she's British, so a lot of times she won't bother saying the to, like typical of me too, to saying that as like with a drop with an American T like 𝗥𝗲. But in American English, you'd probably hear typical of me to, right? To talk about.
Typical of me to. So that's another really nice pattern to memorize is that to, when it's following a word ending in a vowel sound, will usually become a duh. And when it's not preceded by a word ending in a vowel sound, it'll probably maintain the t sound, but it'll still gain that schwa sound, like reduced to a schwa. So t.
She says to here, being British, I think for her that's more natural. So typical of me to talk about.
Yeah, so I talked about how function words, one piece of speech that can become a function word is word endings, but it can also be word beginnings, like about starts with an A, but we usually reduce that to an just like we would the article a. So talk about, she doesn't say talk about, but she connects the K to the A as if it were an article and says talk about. So we have three syllables there. Talk about.
And what's interesting too is there's a lot of silent T's in English, not just in American English, but I think that goes for all accents. So I even think she says to talk about I'd have to listen again
Right.
to the song, but I think she says that.
It probably would be. So again, when we have a word ending in a T and followed by a consonant, instead of it becoming an American T, we might turn it into a glottal T or drop it altogether. So that's the case in it's about my. So she says about my. This is a glottal T where we kind of cut the sound of the T off at the back of the throat instead of fully pronouncing it. So it is there very subtly. It's not like we saw in dentist or international where it disappears altogether. But to the untrained ear, especially if you don't have this glottal sound in your native language, you might not hear it at all. And this is why it's so frustrating. It's the bane of many English learners' existence. We've talked about that expression before. So it's like your villain, the thing that makes your life horrible, the bane of your existence is this glottal T in can't. So we usually say can. And so for many learners that haven't mastered this glottal T yet, it just sounds like can. And we did an entire lesson all about this that we can link in the description if people, if it's the case for you, that's something that's really frustrating for you when natives, it sounds the same, can't and can.
And when we talk about this top T, I always remember and have this picture in my mind. Remember those two cute boys? Charlie bit me.
Charlie bit me.
That's a great way to practice watching that video. He bit my finger.
It's adorable. Yeah. Very British.
They're British, right? And Adele's British, and she's from London, where
She's
there's
got
a
a
region of London.
Cockney, a very thick Cockney accent because she sings so beautifully. The first time I heard her speak, I was shocked. It doesn't sound like her at all.
I hope that you will.
So we have another T plus Y here. That you're well, that you're well, that you're well. It becomes that CH sound.
Did you ever make it out of that town where nothing ever happened?
Oh my God, there's so much in this short line.
Yeah.
A
First,
lot
we should define make it out of this town, right?
That's like a complex phrasal verb. Make it out of.
So many prepositions, so many particles, right? So the verb make it out of somewhere. Basically, it means to get away from that town. So many young people have this dream of getting out of their small town and find their life in a big city, start a new life in a big city. So that's what she's singing here about it.
Another way to think of that is escape. Make it out to be escape.
Good.
Make it out of the place, right? Like you were stuck there, or you couldn't leave, and then if you make it out of there, you are escaping. And yeah, to make it, if you simply say, I made it, what you mean there is like I'm successful, I succeeded, had success in what I was attempting. So did you, very interesting how she starts that line, did you ever? So
Right.
what's happening there, Ethan?
So similarly to how we have a T plus Y becoming a ch sound, when we have a D plus Y, it becomes a j sound. Now I know for me that there's a lot of these different sound formations that we're talking about and everything, that if you're just listening to the audio, it might be difficult for you to follow along. So again, it's going to be really helpful if you listen to this on the RealLife English app and you can follow along with every line on the transcript so you can see the different sounds we're talking about and you can hear how they're transforming. So this is a very common word chunk. We talked about that. Did you, because we say that all the time for questions, did you, becoming did you. And even this did you ever. We use this anytime we're asking someone about an experience to confirm if they had an experience that maybe it's something you talked about in the past. So if I recommend Izzy a restaurant, I was like, oh, did you ever get to try that restaurant that I recommended? Or say Ksenia is talking to me about how she wants to plan a trip to the United States. And it's like, oh, did you ever get to take that trip? So it's a really nice one that you're going to hear all the time. Did you ever? And we can reduce that even more. She didn't do it here, but Americans will often do this. Jew. So instead of it being did you, it becomes just Jew.
So make it out of that town. There's also a silent T, or maybe even she just merges those two sounds, right?
I believe
That town.
This is called elision when we have a double consonant. Like we have that town. And this can even happen sometimes when it's different letters. If you have a D and a T, they can often have this elision. And so we only say one of the consonants in that case. So that town We don't say that town.
Yeah, English is not very convenient if you try to speak it without connected speech because you have that kind of stuff. Like,
Ethan, let me get back a little bit. You use this word to get tongue-tied. This expression, could you define it?
Yeah, if you get tongue-tied, it means that you can imagine that your tongue goes in a knot. This can happen sometimes when you get really excited about something. You're trying to explain it to your friend, and you start tripping over your words. This is kind of like another way to say the same thing, but you're not pronouncing things clearly. You're maybe even saying the wrong word. The person can't understand you. This can happen even in our native languages, right? So you get tongue-tied or you trip over your words.
now let's continue with the next line. It's no secret that the both of us are running out of time. What is she saying there?
So they are running out of time, which means, I believe Ethan defined this phrasal verb earlier in this episode. Run out of something is to lack something, right? Something is, you don't have it anymore. So they don't have time anymore.
It could be something tangible like run out of milk, run out of cereal, or it could be something that's intangible like time, right?
And it comes from the more simple expression to be out of something. So I'm out of milk. I'm out of this. And then if you're running out of that, like you're approaching the point where you will be out of that, right?
And then if you use it in the past, then it's actually finished, right? We ran out of milk. We ran out of time.
It implies that you used it up, or you used what you had.
I like to think of a literal milk carton like running out of the house. It's gone.
But there's some connected speech there that we didn't talk about. So the both of us, how is she saying that?
Yeah, in fact, too, we have another nice example of elision that I talked about before. So this can also happen with a T plus TH sound. So we have that the. We don't say both the T and the because, again, it's just really difficult. That the compared to just saying that the. So you might want to try that if you're listening, if you're watching. And then she said the both of us. Both of us. So this is another really nice word chunk because it's one of those ones you hear about all the time, right? Both of us. Like both of us like eating pizza. Both of us are vegetarians. Both of us speak Portuguese, right? So you should learn that one. Both of us. So we have the of reduce, and it doesn't reduce all the way down to a schwa sound, but we actually link the V to the us. So of us, and then both, of course, connects onto it. Both of us. That the both of us.
And running out of time, that also has some connected speech in it. How is she saying that?
We have another really nice American T there. We have another example of the of reducing. So first of all, out of. This is another nice word chunk that we see in all sorts of different situations. A lot of times we'll just hear this as outa. If there's a consonant following it, usually it'll just be outa. So like we're out of milk. It's another way to say that, right? We're out of milk. Here she does pronounce the v. It reduces, so it's out of instead of outa, and it's out of time. And she said a full running here, but Americans and many Brits would often say this dropping the G, so we'd say running instead of running. And we would even have that N at the end of running connect to the out of. So running out of time, or running out of time.
So let's continue with the next song, which is Set Fire to the Rain, probably my favorite. But I set fire to the rain, watched it pour as I touched your face. Well, it burned while I cried, 'cause I heard it screaming out your name.
I really have to give you some kudos, Izzy. You chose a very challenging singer to try to emulate in today's podcast. Set the bar very high for yourself here.
All right, but in the first line, actually the name of the song, Set Fire to the Rain, that's an interesting collocation to set fire, because we don't just say like to put fire on something. Actually, put, you may hear that more often in the opposite expression, like to put out a fire. It's just to extinguish, to make that fire go away. But if you want to make something be on fire, you're going to use the verb set more often, more commonly, right?
Another way to say that might be light a fire. which would
Light a
have
fire.
connected speech there as well. American T, right? Light a fire, light a fire.
There's actually a somewhat vulgar expression that I just find it so visual, but so nice. It's like this light a fire under somebody's ass. Is that it?
It's when you want to spur someone to action. You want to make them be really motivated to take action. You need to light a fire under their ass. So you put some sort of pressure on them.
There's some connected speech there too. Light a fire, the American T. But anyway, so I set fire to the rain. Watched it pour as I touched your face.
There's this word pour, which is often collocated with rain. So we can even say, it means heavy rainfall. So we can even say it's pouring out, meaning that it's raining a lot. And there's an expression, when it rains, it pours. So we'll use this expression when things are going to hell, meaning that things are going really badly. And someone might tell you when you're explaining this to them, you know, when it rains, it pours. Like when things go bad, they really go to hell. They really go poorly.
Yeah, but the connected speech there, obviously, watch is one of those verbs that it ends in ed, and you won't say watched, you'll say watched.
Yeah. That's something that learners really need to study, is these ed endings so that you get them right, especially when it comes to connected speech. If you were pronouncing the ed wrong at the end of the word, then you might get the connected speech wrong as well, right?
And here there's a silent T in it, so you won't even say it. It would be watched it as I. It's a Z sound there with as, so as I. Watched it pour as I touch your face. Well, it burned while I cried, 'cause I heard it screaming out your name.
So what does screaming out mean, Ksenia?
Screaming out is calling his name loudly.
And how is she saying those words, those lines there? While I cried.
So we have the pronoun I. So it doesn't exactly, it can't really reduce, but it usually connects. So we have while I, that the L connects onto there, right? And that also connects to cried. So it all becomes one chunk. While I cried.
Anyway, so it burned while she cried because I heard it. 'Cause I heard it screaming out your name. So how is she saying that, those first few words there? 'Cause I heard it.
That's another nice chunk to learn. So I heard it. That we have the D from heard connect to it. Heard it. I heard it. And 'cause comes from because. This is very common that we reduce because just to 'cause. And again, this is a really nice chunk, because that a lot of times we need to use this explanations, like I was late because I had to pick up my kid from school. So you could use this all the time, because I heard it.
Because I thought you were there. Because there's a lot of times we use it.
All the
This
time, for
communication.
sure. So we heard this before. Out your becomes oucher, because we have that T plus Y combination, oucher, screaming out your name. We talked about too, right, with phrasal verb. So screaming out is a phrasal verb. I oftentimes would drop the G here, so it could become screaming out your name.
So yeah, that's the chorus of Set Fire to the Rain. What do you think about watching now a very short clip with Adele talking, just so we can hear how she actually speaks, because it is very different, as Ethan was saying. So what do you guys think?
I think it's nice if anyone hasn't heard it before to share that with her.
And in this clip, she is talking about her son and the fact that he's been picking up on her British accent, even though they live in LA, in Los Angeles. Amazingly, surprisingly, he has a British accent.
But yeah, he does on like, you know, the word like free, as in like the number 3.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, it's not free, it's like 3. Like, you know, he's a little bit more well-spoken than me.
So if anyone couldn't understand that, if you're just listening to that, you might want to check out again on the RealLife English app so you can follow along with the transcript, because even for me, I have to focus to understand her thick Cockney accent.
She says
One of
that
the characteristic
is,
features here she is referring to is this changing the sound th with f, right? Instead of saying 3, they would say free, something like that, right?
In the Cockney, right?
In Cockney accent, right?
Yeah. And she says that he's a little bit more well-spoken than she is. So
That's
what's
a
she
nice
saying there?
expression. If someone's well-spoken, it means that they are eloquent with their speech. Someone who's not well-spoken, they might make grammatical errors. They might have not so, I don't know, what we call correct pronunciation or more standard pronunciation in a language.
And the way she said that was actually really interesting because she used that Cockney accent with the T's, the glottal T's. She said that he is a little bit more well-spoken.
Little bit.
All right, guys. So this is what I brought for you today. I actually rehearsed that a bit before recording just to see if I could really sing this, and thought I could. So I hope I didn't hurt your ears.
Certainly not.
I can see so many students out there singing Adele today.
I'm definitely going to be listening to her playlist later.
And you'll find a lot of connected speech in her lyrics. As I said, they all sound very conversational, and it's so nice, for learning English, because even though it is poetic, but you can learn really a ton of practical vocab.
So thank you so much, Easy, for bringing Adele, inviting her to our today's episode, I would say.
Yes,
and
we are special guest.
Special guest, yeah. Had special guest from Great Britain. I can clearly see that you are a huge fan of Adele now, but I was curious to ask Ethan. How about you, Ethan? Have you ever had Adele on repeat on Spotify?
Definitely. We were actually just talking about her the other day. I guess this will link to what we're going to talk about in the next section of the podcast. But listening to music in the car, we were talking about these artists that they put out an album and then they just disappear. You don't hear from them for years until they put out another album. And I think Adele is pretty infamous for this, that she puts out just these tremendous albums, best-selling albums, right? And then you don't hear from her for years until she puts out another best-selling album. So I guess that means probably she's away focusing hard at work. But when she does come out with an album, I'm always right on top of it. I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Yeah. Let me quickly ask you here. So we know the word famous. Adele is definitely a famous singer, but you described her as infamous. Can you define the word infamous?
Infamous is usually when you're famous, but for something bad. So we have criminals that are infamous. Here I'm using it in a lighter way, but I'm saying she's infamous because no one likes that she disappears for years. We have to wait for years between her albums, especially her biggest fans, right? So it's exactly that she's infamous for taking way too long to bring new music to her fans.
Thank you so much. And we don't want to be infamous for not bringing the best, the favorite part of our students, what I'm digging. So Ethan, let me ask you, what have you been digging this week?
So I've been, as I was saying, on vacation. Me and Jordi, we went to the south of Spain, to Andalusia, which it was his first time there. So for me, it was a pleasure because it was my third time. Sorry. I absolutely love it. It's a area of Spain that's full of history, culture, fantastic food, probably the best food in the country, arguably. And we drove because flights were so expensive, and we ended up making a road trip out of it. So what I thought I would share, though, about it, I'm not going to share the whole thing, is we drove down south, and then we made our way back up north, making stops and so on. One of the stops that we made was a city that we've heard about, a little beach town, touristic town in a part of Spain called Almeria. And this town, we've heard it's really cool vibes and everything on the beach. But we must have been visiting an off season because it seemed to us a lot like a retirement community.
Felt yourself a little bit older there?
I felt myself very young because literally at the pool, there was no one, I'm not exaggerating, there was no one that was less than 20 or 30 years older than us. So we were the youngest by a lot. And one of the, I'd say the apex of, we were only there for 2 nights luckily, but the apex of this experience was that we went for dinner. And it was a place that was packed. So, the menu looked very good. So we're like, we'll wait for a table, have a drink. We got our table, sat down, ordered. And then a woman comes out and puts on music and she starts singing. So she was the entertainment for the night, I guess. And it was just blasting because we were right by her. And maybe because the the audience in general, maybe their hearing's not so good, so they had to make it a little bit louder. And then just like all of these older people just start breaking out onto the dance floor. They start dancing like they're really getting jiggy with it, we could say. And, you know, it was all music from like the 50s, the 60s. It's music that my parents probably would really like dancing to, but we just felt it was this surreal moment. Like, you know, where the heck are we? There's just all these old people dancing to old music and so on. And like really
Time machine.
exactly something
Travel
to
back
look
in time.
forward to in 30 years or something. But it was a bizarre experience. So we learned our lesson that these sort of small beach towns, we better go in the high season, which is July and August. So there'll be more people our age there, I guess.
But at least you know where to
Alright.
go to in 30 years, as you said.
That might be it. Hopefully we can be out there dancing.
Save it
like
for the
those guys.
future. Let me ask you here. You use, I didn't quite catch it, but you use such expression about those elderly people dancing, like jigging, something like that with the word jigging. Can you repeat it, please, and
It's
define
to get jiggy with it, or get your groove on. This is another way to say that. It's someone having a good time dancing.
There's that classic song, right? From Will Smith, Getting Jiggy With It. Na, 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 na.
It might come
Oh,
from
okay.
that, maybe.
Getting jiggy with it.
Getting
Oh,
jiggy with it.
yeah. So I would never think of it. So he's like, that shows how I listen to music. I just listen to the melody of it, never listen to the lyrics. So that episode was so helpful for me, and I hope for many learners out there to finally hear the lyrics, what the song is about.
And over on our other channel on Learning with TV series, we have so many different lessons, a whole playlist of lessons learning with music. So people who do want to learn, understand the lyrics, sing along, practice connected speech with music and so on, definitely should check out that playlist, which we could link in the show notes.
Nice. Another word you used there in the beginning of your story was apex. Like it was the apex of
Ooh.
something. What is
Yeah. That means the climax, the high moment. So I was using it a little bit, sarcastically there, but it was a high moment just because it was such a bizarre, unexpected experience.
I just when you were telling about this, that you are the youngest among all the other people there, I just thought, anybody called you like kiddo? Hey kiddo.
It could be. We were getting a lot of stares. Like it felt like we were visiting. It's not a retirement community, but it felt like we were visiting a retirement community because people were just like, what are these young people doing here? The only other young people we saw were what's this called? Like the hotel entertainers that do different. They did one night, they did like a flamenco show. Another night they were doing some sort of comedy act or something. So that was luckily just a short part of my vacation, but it was a really amazing time. I think the rest of it we made up with it, spent plenty of time with people our age. So had a lot of
I'm
fun.
glad to hear.
So guys, thank you so much for joining us today for this episode all about connected speech. I hope you had so much fun singing with us and learning the lyrics. And I believe that if you practice connected speech a little bit more right after today's lesson, it will definitely help you with your speaking and listening skills, as I just mentioned at the very beginning of this episode. So all of you who stayed with us till the end, thank you so much. And if you want to support us, if you're enjoying these lessons, please give us a 5-star review on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. If you're listening to this episode on any streaming platform, don't forget to send us a comment there. And if you are here over on YouTube, also use the comment section to share any suggestions or any feedback for us. We really read and we are grateful for any suggestions for the next topics we could use. And if you are here on our YouTube channel, please remember to subscribe and give this video a like, and also hit the bell down below to be one of the first to watch our next episode. Easy, you definitely have a talent. Thank you so much for singing with us today.
I appreciate it.
And Adele united us today.
United through Adele.
And united through Adele. And yeah, just remember, guys, no matter what divides us, that which unites us is far greater. 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
Yeah. Are you feeling overwhelmed by your busy life? Struggling to find time for doing things that truly matter to you, like studying and practicing your English? Today, Izzy and I will talk about how, even with a crazy schedule, you can actually become a confident English speaker with 10-minute daily habits. Let's get into it.